welcome to everyone, and thank you very much for joining our webinar. If you recall, we had a little bit of a false start last month, unfortunately, due to a bit of illness between us, and we're very pleased to be able to bring this webinar series to you. We're focused really on making every lead count. That's what we're talking about over the course of today's webinar and over the next couple of webinars. Firstly, by way of introduction, my name's Dan Peterson. I'm the CEO of iBuildNew. Hopefully many of you on the call I've met before and or will meet in the future. I'm very pleased to also introduce our two speakers. Firstly, Matt Killam, who's the CIO of iBuildNew. Matt's had quite extensive experience in this field of lead management, lead generation, and digital marketing generally, both here at his time with iBuildNew over the last couple of years, but also prior to that, particularly as the CIO of Stratton Finance, and also with a number of other digital startups that he's been involved in. So Matt, looking forward to chatting to you and kind of learning from some of your experience during the course of today. And also we have with us Brett Lerner. Brett's the SMB executive for Salesforce. We're delighted to have Brett with us. Brett brings a wealth of knowledge from his time with Salesforce and prior to that, working particularly in the last few years with small and medium businesses to help them grow their business using their CRM, and also how to really market to clients digitally and manage that in a very automated way, or as automated as possible through the use of the Salesforce software. Today is going to be fairly conversational. What you'll find is that I'll be sort of steering a bit of conversation between Matt and Brett, and I'll have a few words to say at different points. What we're hoping to do over the course of the hour is leave about 10 minutes at the end for some chat, and we really hope that people have got questions. If you do, please put them into the chat box, into the Q&A section of the Zoom function here, and the last 10 minutes of today's webinar, we'll try and address a number of those questions. So firstly, in terms of agenda, if I can bring that forward. In terms of the agenda for today, we're going to start with some real fundamentals, and then we're going to talk a little bit about lead allocation practices. We'll talk also a bit about making first contact with inquiries or leads. We'll also get into tracking and measurement of performance around leads and lead management. And we'll wrap up with probably a series of insights and conclude with some Q&A, as I touched on before. As I said right up front, this is a little webinar series. This is the first of 3 webinars. And really to start with, we're focusing on just some building blocks and probably what I often refer to as getting to first base. It's obviously the very sort of top of the funnel and the first start of the sales process. Before we move to some other topics in the second and the third webinar, where we'll kind of explore a bit more about best practices sort of further down the sales funnel. I probably should call out that obviously we've got Salesforce, joining us today, but I did want to make clear right up front that while we're a very big fan of and user of Salesforce, today is not about the CRM. It's not about Salesforce, but Salesforce do bring an incredible level of expertise in this domain around lead management, and that's why we've invited Brett to join us today. All the topics really will cover really can be applied across any CRM. Even if you're not using a CRM, I think you'll learn quite a bit from today's discussion that can be applied without the use of a CRM. It's clearly best practice to have a CRM and a very good functioning CRM. But even if you don't have one, there will be a range of topics and tips I think you'll pick up from today's conversation, whether you're a home builder or a land developer, that you'll be able to benefit from much of this discussion. At its core, a CRM is an approach or a methodology, not technology. The focus of today's discussion is really about the process, not the technology. So let's get started. In terms of a couple of fundamentals that are really key to driving outcomes from a CRM, there's quite a few, and I might sort of open up with you, Matt. If if there was a couple of really key things to keep in mind when sort of starting out, what would they be?
Thanks, Dan, and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think we'll sort of start out with a few, I guess you'd call them hygiene factors, reasonably basic, but also things that some businesses haven't got quite right or don't appreciate the importance of necessarily, before we move on to some more advanced sort of stuff. First and foremost, it's how you get lead data into your CRM and some hygiene factors around that process and making sure that that process is run efficiently. Some key principles to follow in terms of ingesting that lead data. So, I mean, number one, keeping it simple. One of the big mistakes I've seen a lot of businesses make around ingesting lead data is actually trying to collect far more information than they actually need. There's a time and a place for that, particularly later in the sales funnel, but really in the early stages, it's about really honing in on what do you need to know about your leads in the upfront and then the early stages of trying to get in touch with that lead and then convert that lead through to being further down the sales funnel. What's really important to your business? How will each piece of that data be used? Is it really needed? So to really critically analyze the information you're asking for, and this is a topic we're going to return to in a couple of slides. Consistency is another big factor. Again, you really need to make sure that the lead data you're ingesting and the data you're ingesting about your customers or your leads is consistent. There's nothing worse than having this great pool of leads and not really being able to do a lot more with them other than look at them because you haven't got consistency in the way that data is captured. That's simple things like making sure that you've been consistent with processes for gathering data, that you get your aligned processes and requirements for lead entry between automatic and manual entry. And also consistency about when you enter information as well. And again, this is a topic we'll return to in more detail later in the webinar. And then ensuring the data is clean. So again, it goes back to the point of really is terrible when you've got all these leads and you can't do a lot with them because the data's not clean. And that's simple things like making sure the pick lists and drop downs are used, standardized formats and checking phone numbers are valid and all these sort of things. Most CRM tools obviously will do a great job of helping with this, as will sort of if it's digitally generated leads, website forms and so on, but it's something to really keep an eye on as well. And then making sure that, again, clean processes, clean tools for staff to use will help with cleanliness of the data hygiene coming in. So, I mean, garbage in, garbage out is kind of the sum up of those last couple of points. And technology is only good as the information that's provided and used. So really making sure you keep it simple, keep it consistent, and keep it clean with data initial lead entry is sort of some of those really basic hygiene factors to begin with.
It sounds like a pretty solid set of basic principles to really start with. But what else would you recommend in terms of building a blueprint for CRM and lead management success?
Another big one to focus on as part of that getting leads into your CRM and into your world is really manual versus automatic entry of leads. Again, this is focused on bringing leads into a CRM system, whatever it might be. You've got two options. You can type things in manually, or you can bring them in automatically where customers have provided that information through web forms or other marketing channels. Just to explore perhaps some of the pros and cons of each. There's some obvious pros and cons of the two, but perhaps to go to some of the things that are not quite as obvious at face value. Automatic lead entry, and again, we're mainly referring here to getting leads coming in through APIs and web to lead forms and so on from digital marketing channels more than anything else. There's clear stuff like it reduces human error and missing leads and so on. It goes to the consistency and cleanliness of data we talked about on the previous slide. But most importantly, with this automatic entry, it gets leads into CRM faster. So that's not about effort, it's about velocity. So that's about making sure that when a lead is arrived, particularly a digital lead has arrived through a website or a digital marketing channel, it gets into your CRM immediately. There are still plenty of businesses out there that are receiving leads via email, for example, and someone has to pick it up, process it, enter it into a CRM system, and that is lost time, and time is everything. Again, we're going to come and talk about contact procedures and the difference of getting to leads quickly has later in the webinar, but that velocity piece is really important to recognise, which is one of the benefits of automatic lead entry into a CRM. It's also reduced opportunity cost. Any lead that doesn't go into the CRM has got a significant opportunity cost attached to it from potentially not being actioned and followed up and so on properly. And again, automatically entering everything you can eliminates a lot of that opportunity cost. A few cons around automatic lead entry, around upfront effort to set up and so on, but really the cons are not significant, a little bit of upfront work and that's about it. The other side of things, manual entry. And again, there aren't a lot of pros to manual entry where automatic is possible. So we're not going to dwell on that. Really, if you have digital leads coming in particular where they can be fed straight to a CRM, that really is what you should be doing for some of the reasons we just talked about. But it's worth acknowledging too that there's scenarios where manual entry is required, and so in those cases, there you're going to have to handle manual lead entry into CRMs. The important thing there though is to make sure that it's really simple and easy. And again, it's not done on paper and so on. It's done through tablets into CRM systems, direct into CRM systems and so on. The cons of manual entry are pretty obvious too. There's significant ongoing labour costs, potential for human error, that lack of velocity I talked about before. But just to sort of reiterate all that from my point of view, to say you should try and get all these into CRMs automatically is critical and very, very important. Everyone should be working towards doing that. And just appreciate it's not just about lack of labour, saving labour. It's also about that velocity and the reducing the opportunity cost.
Thanks, Matt. Hey, Brett, just over to you. I mean, we've just talked a bit about the pros and cons. We've heard Matt sort of sharing, a few views around manual versus automatic entry. And clearly, there can be a variety of ways a lead can come into a CRM. But from your point of view, what is best practice? Based off your own experience, and how does a good CRM make this easy?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that one of the things that we talk a lot about at Salesforce, especially in the small business space where people resources are limited, is really thinking about your CRM as another part of your team, right? When you have limited people resources, the more you can, as Matt was saying, automate, the more value you're going to get out of it. So it's not just about automating just for the sake of automating, just to save time. That's a great reason to do it, but it's about having all of the data in one place, right? Data in 2021 and beyond is one of the most valuable aspects of your business. So whatever you can do to avoid using paper, make sure you put it into your CRM. The more you can automate, the better, because it will save your team time and energy. But if there are cases where it has to be manual, somebody calls in, for example, make sure you're entering that into the CRM. Make it easy for your staff. Do not put blockers up where they don't have to be. This should be simplifying your process. It should not be something where this is actually making it more complicated. This is how your team actually gets bought in on the adoption of the platform and really, really gets a lot of value out of it, both for the individual user and of course the business as a whole. So again, whether you choose to go down the mostly automated and just a bit of manual or a fully manual route, make sure you do have a really, really good process that everybody is aligned to internally, and just do not use paper would be my number one, first and foremost piece of advice. The more you can capture in one system, the more value you're putting back into your business and to your team.
Good advice, Brett. Thank you. We'll come back to you in a minute, but Matt, I just wanted to perhaps shift the conversation a little bit now. We've discussed how you get a lead into your CRM, but what data should you be getting captured on every single lead that comes in?
A good question, Dan. And look, there's a lot of things. There's some things that are really obvious and we don't need to go through around contact details and so on. And then beyond that, it's quite bespoke to every business. So perhaps this is more a focus on how do you figure out what data needs to be captured for your business rather than specific guidelines. And this goes back to the point that was made earlier about really keeping things simple and making sure that you're collecting the minimal set of data you need, particularly at the early stages of getting a lead into your business and into your CRM. Talk to your internal stakeholders, from sales to admin to management, about what data they need to know from each customer. And most importantly, why do they want that information? Because if you go and have those conversations, you're going to end up with 50 things that people want to know about. It's not practical for a variety of reasons to capture that much information from someone up front. What you really need to distill it down to is what is the absolute key set of things you need to get in touch with that lead and to start the sales process with them. Sometimes it's a walk-in or it's a phone call. You've kind of started the sales process, but again, it's what information do you need to take it to the next step and make sure you can continue to engage with that customer. So you need to ask yourself for every piece of data that you're capturing from a lead, what will we do with it? Why are we capturing it? Do we really need this data? What outputs will it achieve? What we'll actually do with it is really, really important. And then most importantly, when do we need it? Because that's the other aspect of this as well. It's not just about collecting information. Do you need the information? It's about when do you need the information. There'll be things that come out of this that actually, it turns out, are really important, but you don't need to know them upfront on the lead. You need to know them a few steps down the sales funnel. There are, of course, exceptions here. If you can collect data automatically without having to ask anyone or get anyone to fill it in the form, of course, collect as much as you can. This is more about the manual process, whether it's a user filling in a web form or whether it's someone on the phone or someone in a display home collecting data from a customer. It's these ones where you really got to be narrow in and hone in on what's most important. But overarching all of that, probably the one most important principle of what data should you capture is to say you should capture every single lead into your CRM, regardless of where they end up in terms of your sales process and regardless of how they got to you. Still too many businesses out there that are great, have maybe got to the point where they're great at capturing web lead data and are great at making sure that digital leads and maybe phone leads are well and truly captured and put into CRM, but let things fall through the crack when it comes to walk-ins and in-person leads. And we'll talk a bit more about the process around that later on in the webinar, but really important that you don't let any of them slip through the cracks. Even if someone is a lead that's not going to go anywhere right now, they need to go into your CRM because they are a buyer in the future. Just as a quick example from iBuildNew world, for example, here, we various ways customers can come to us before we then refer them on to our builders. But often customers will start with a newsletter subscription on our website. All we ask them for is their email and the state, for example. Next stage for us might be about encouraging them to create an account. Now, there's lots of things we'd like to know about them at that point, but again, just getting their name and some preferences is probably the most important thing there, so we know how to talk to them effectively. Later on, we're trying to encourage them to, when they're ready, to go and browse, designs, and then perhaps talk to our team of new home advisors. And at that point there, we need their contact details, so we're asking them for that information there. And much of the information at that point is simply about getting their inquiry to the right person in our new home advisory team and getting in touch with them efficiently. And then as a final step, our new home advisors will talk to that customer and we'll get a lot more information at that point, because that's all the things that all of our builders need to know and land developers need to know when we ultimately refer that customer onto them. So we've really gone through and tried to narrow down at each stage there, what's the minimal set of information we need, how we put as few barriers as possible into the process. And then there's lots more we collect later on, but at that point, at least we have achieved the main things we want to achieve, which is talking to a customer, determining their needs, helping them, and then referring them on to our builders.
Thanks, Matt. And look, just moving on a little bit, we've covered now sort of getting leads in your CRM. You've just touched on a bit about the data to capture and what to capture and when. How do you then get an overview of the lead pipeline, and what should you actually look for?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And this is really where it does come down to good CRM tools. I mean, it's, with a large pipeline of leads and opportunities, it's very difficult to get that visualization without a solid CRM tool. As I said, Salesforce are really good at this, but other CRMs also have their ways of doing this. One of those key functions of CRM then is to manage a long tail sale process, so it will help you visualize this pipeline, both from the point of view of a salesperson or an account manager who needs to actually action leads and talk to customers, and also from the point of view of management, be it marketing or sales management, looking at what everyone's pipelines look like. So what are some of the things you see in a CRM, typically in a leader opportunity pipeline? Again, it's bespoke to most businesses, and CRMs, but the sort of stuff you would typically see is, again, that easy top-down and bottom-up visibility. So it comes both from the point of view of the salesperson or account manager and from management looking down at what's going on. Clearly need to be able to see all the leads in a pipeline or referrals in a pipeline. Sometimes not every individual one, depending on how many leads someone is managing, but certainly the ones that are forecast to be likely to convert. Required actions clearly identified. That's one of the most important things in terms of an opportunity pipeline, is being able to see what should happen next for every single one of these leads and these opportunities, and also prioritizing those actions as well. And then finally, forecasting tools will come out of this. It all might sound reasonably complicated, but again, with a good CRM tool, it will actually do most of this for you. It's just more talking about the sort of things that you might expect when you get to this point with CRM.
And Matt, one of the things you just talked about there was leads and opportunities, with a couple of words I picked up. And what exactly is the difference between those?
Look, there's a difference in terminology used in different businesses, and again, different CRMs. The lead and opportunity one is the phrasing that Salesforce use, and it's what we've adopted. It's quite common in the industry. It's really recognizing that you're going to have lots and lots and lots of people in your CRM. Not all of them are at the same stage of the sales process. And particularly, it's about separating the people that have just made an early stage inquiry from those that are likely to proceed down the sales funnel, have a likelihood of converting. So a lead would be all these early stage ones that comes in that might be hundreds or thousands of people a month, or tens of thousands, depending on your business. The opportunities are the ones that have passed some sort of initial qualification. So they're real people. They've got the genuine potential to be a buyer or a purchaser of your product or service. Any other criteria you want to put along that. At that point in time, they may be converted to an opportunity. And that then means they move into the parts of the CRM system where lots of additional things kick in, but again, they really start being visualized through some of these pipeline management tools we were just talking about there. So it's really just about filtering who you're looking at, who you're talking to. So you're not overwhelmed essentially by huge numbers coming through. As I said a few times, Salesforce do this really well. So I might throw to Brett here just to perhaps give us, talk to this, or perhaps show us potentially an example of what some of this can look like in Salesforce as it can in other CRMs as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm quickly going to share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So yeah, I think that so far sort of the theme here has been about capturing the data and how you're actually using it. When you, again, in a Salesforce environment, when you do capture those, whether it is automated or manual, this is a great way to kind of visualize that for your individual reps, giving them a list to call down. And the more data you capture, the more valuable it gets. This is a bit more advanced, but for some of the more advanced organizations on here, the more data you get, you're actually able to even score them as well. So you can see sort of who is most likely to be ready to buy. So those sales reps can really capitalize on those opportunities. But the way that you actually visualize this is quite up to the individual. And another way that we see this done quite often on the lead side of things is this Kanban view. And so you're able to really see kind of, as Matt was saying, where they are in the buying cycle, or in this case, in the lead cycle. Now, just by kind of dragging and dropping, you can move people throughout that cycle as you go along and actually move them through that process. And the same goes for your opportunities. So as they were saying earlier, the verbiage within Salesforce is leads and opportunities. You can define lead again as anyone who's just come through, maybe just inquired or just given you a certain amount of data to start using. An opportunity will be once you're actually engaging with that prospect to hopefully make the sale. Same thing goes for the opportunities. Once you're ready to manage those, you can really have this really clean list of things to see. But I think that Kanban view is even more impactful on this opportunity side, because then it doesn't only represent where they sit in the buying cycle, but how much that's actually worth for you. And so as an individual sales rep, you can really see a good visual of your actual pipeline and move it through and see those actual revenue amounts move at the same time. That's a really good view for an individual sales rep. But why this is so important for the executives and managers on the call is the actual data you're capturing and what you can do with it. And this is where a CRM goes from sort of an individual contributor tool to really help them manage their book of business to a single source of truth that really, really helps you understand where your business is at. And so if you take a look at this dashboard here, just because you've captured all of this data on this particular set of whatever you're trying to capture, depending on your particular business, you're able to start really you're able to start seeing all of that different data visualized in a way that's very digestible, not just for yourself and your management, but also for any boards or investors that are thinking about investing in your business. So whether it is just generally your close business and how people are interacting with your service team, but also when you're talking about leads, how many you're generating, and what type of ROI you're getting from that. Actually, I'll show you one more really quickly. So on the topic of leads and ROI, this dashboard here will show you not only where your leads are coming from, but how much revenue that's resulting in for your business. So if you're looking at this one right here as it loads, yep, so you're able to see kind of that difference between events, web marketing, email. You could have really anything you like there, whether it's the website, or really any way you capture leads. If somebody does just walk in and give you their information from that particular showroom they've gone to, but then actually see the revenue it's driven as well. So this starts to be able to really help you make intelligent decisions and drive more and more leads and put the money and the marketing spend that you have allocated to the business in the right places at the right time.
Great, thanks, Brett. If you just want to stop maybe sharing your screen.
There you go.
While Dan's getting the screen share, the slide pack set up there again, probably to add on top of that too, there's things that plenty of great things you can do with pipeline management tools and CRMs that are probably not appropriate for a demo environment like Brett was just showing off there. But one of the big ones is specifically calling out next actions required on every lead as well, and really making people task driven as opposed to let's say lead or opportunity driven. So it's very, very clear, not just where all of your opportunities are in different stages of a pipeline, but exactly what needs to happen next on every single one of them. And if that doesn't happen, that it hasn't happened.
Yeah, agree, mate. Just to confirm that slide's come back up on the screen. Great. All right. Hey, thanks, Brett and Matt. We covered a lot actually in that short period of time. I might just try and summarise a couple of things. I certainly heard a fair bit around, start with the principles of simple, consistent, and clean. When approaching a CRM from a data entry, point of view, the old adjective of junk in, junk out, it couldn't be truer when it comes to a CRM. Automation was a big theme. We talked about automation of entry is clearly preferable. Manual's got a place, and manual can work well in some circumstances, but certainly no paper. I think that was sort of came through pretty clearly. Days have gone where you're sort of writing things down on paper and passing paper around. Manual entry still needs to be effectively the same. Where if it's coming as a digital lead and being automated, the manual entry should effectively be the same in terms of when it comes into the CRM, and trying to automate, whatever you can once it's within the CRM. We also talked a little bit about, sort of matching the data collected and the flow of how it is collected to your own processes, especially when you talk about manual data entry and some scenarios around that. I think, we want to sort of stress the point of be careful on what data you do collect. Start on the lighter side. Light touch is a very good starting point, and then collect a bit more over time as the sales journey continues. So get the bare minimum up front and build on that from there. We did also talk just very briefly about, every single lead, getting that into your CRM and getting it in as early as possible. As soon as you're making contact, some form of contact, get that into the CRM. Allow you to sort of distinguish then between a lead and an opportunity in terms of pipeline management. Make sure pipelines can be easily viewed by both managers and sales staff. And I think Brett just showed a couple of examples before of what can be done with Salesforce. And of course, other CRMs will have similar functionality. And make sure the pipeline, the pipeline management includes task prioritization, alerting, and exception reporting to really make sure you get the most out of that as management. So we are going to shift the conversation on a little bit now and talk a little bit about allocation of leads and some approaches to that. Now, we've talked quite a bit about generating a lead or referral and taking that into the CRM, but who is actually going to service that lead is probably the next decision that needs to be taken. It's quite a significant next step. One of the biggest benefits of the CRM can deliver is efficiency around allocation of leads. We're going to explore in this section kind of a few different approaches to that. Matt, I might kick off with you. When you have a lot of leads coming into a business, and certainly more than one team member, which is pretty common, that's going to be responding to that inquiry or that lead, what are some of the ways you can actually go about allocating those leads?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I've got to say, this is one of my favourite topics when it comes to CRM and lead management, because it can be so impactful, so massively impactful getting lead allocation and lead rotation correct. So, look, I mean, up front, you've got two choices. You can allocate leads manually, or you can do it in automated fashion. Again, it's a bit like the initial lead entry. Manual is valid in some circumstances, particularly small organisations, but it breaks down pretty fast, or it starts to show its weaknesses, shall we say, pretty fast, unless you're a very small organisation. And a note that I include manual includes users self-allocating leads. If you have all your leads dropping into a lead queue in CRM or in a shared inbox and people are grabbing them from there when they're ready for them, that is still manual allocation of leads. So I won't dwell on manual too much, really talk about the automated options here. What do we mean by automated allocation of leads? Literally, the system deciding when a lead arrives, who that lead should be serviced by in terms of your internal sales team, and dropping it in that person's lap. Really, it's about ensuring, first and foremost, an incredibly fast response time to all leads that arrive in your world. Speed of contact of leads is well proven to be one of the key factors in terms of grabbing that lead and converting it, getting to it before your competitors get to it. So really, automatic lead allocation plays a big role in that speed and that velocity. Second most important is then also having the right person, actually deal with that lead as well. Again, with some smart system allocation choices, you can do a better job than manual in terms of deciding, particularly at large lead volumes, and deciding who should actually be most suited to talking to that person. as I said before, it's one of the most important things, in my view, quality automated lead allocation to dealing with leads effectively in any business. You know, a variety of reasons. It improves customer service in terms of getting the lead to the right person in every case, improves speed of response times to leads and all the benefits that come from that. Improves accountability, much easier to work on improving the way you deal with leads if each lead is assigned to a single person and they are made accountable for that, rather than some form of manual or self-allocation occurring where no one's accountable for a lead for a significant period of time. Makes performance management around that easier and so on. Ultimately, all these things, they lead to increased contact rates, increased conversions, and increased sales. I will note, automatic lead allocation can also be extremely complicated, and it might already be sounding that way from some of the things I've said. But it's one of those areas where the 80-20 rule applies very often. We're going to go into a little bit more detail shortly about what these could look like, but it's very much a case of 80-20 rule. You can get a lot of benefit out of the sort of simpler parts of automatic lead allocation.
I think that all makes sense, Matt. Obviously, it's going to be more efficient to manage lead allocation with some level of automation, but there's also several options. You know, you've just mentioned there. In practice, what might this actually look like?
So again, this is quite bespoke for every organisation, but we can talk about some of the things that apply in every case, and then some of the things you might use to decide what automatic lead allocation should look like inside your own organisation. First, we've got to understand what the criteria are that you could be using to allocate and rotate these leads. Type of distribution is a fundamental one. So again, you can have leads that are automatically allocated when the lead arrives, when a user fills out a web form, for example, or you can do kind of just-in-time allocation, where leads aren't immediately allocated when they arrive from a web form, but they are by the system based on the availability of people to service them and get onto them. So they sit in a shared pool, but then are automatically pulled out of the shared pool and put into the hands of individual people as appropriate. Again, or you can do a combination of those two as well. And that's probably the absolute best practice, to have a combination of those two, you know, where maybe, for example, special criteria, like only certain people can service this type of lead, are in play. You'd probably do on arrival allocations to give it straight to the people most suitable. And for the rest, you might use just in time, so you can factor in things like the workload and the availability of people to service the other leads. You're probably going to have some form of round robin system here, potentially weighted. You know, again, you don't want all your leads going to one person. You need to make sure they are distributed amongst your sales team. You can consider attributes of the lead, you know, things like the geography of the customer, you know, and other aspects of the customer. Skills-based factors, you know, maybe the type of, a type of product or service that the customer or the lead has inquired about. And then other items that are quite internalized. So again, availability of salespeople to talk to a lead, the workload they're currently under, how many leads are in their queue, all these sort of things. So you're going to combine a whole bunch of factors like this to come up with what a lead rotation system may look like this. And we're going to give an example in a minute, perhaps, to give that a slightly more definition around that. I often like to draw, though, the equivalence to what's happened with call centers over the years here. Again, just as a way to think about automatic lead allocation. You know, you go back to the old days, you know, and everyone calling businesses dealt with an operator first. It's like manual lead allocation. We then moved on to sort of queues without an operator. You know, that's a bit like sort of having lead allocation automated, but with no smarts attached to it. That's just basically making sure everyone sits in the queue and they're given to a call agent as someone becomes available. We then moved to sort of self-selected queues, you know, where customers provided some information through IVR systems about what they wanted to talk to, and that dropped them into the right queue. And that's sort of like just-in-time lead allocation, but with a little bit of smarts in it. And then fully intelligent queues are things that are coming up nowadays. People have started to experience where, you know, people self-select. There's also a level of, you know, talking to a system, telling them what they want. Often CRM systems will know what a customer's products they have with a business and will use that information to allocate them internally. I'm drawing the comparison here to call centers and call queues because they're perhaps more familiar concepts to a lot of people, but the same sort of things apply to these sort of automatic lead allocation when they're coming in through other channels, through digital sources and so on. So then finally, just here, I guess I give an example perhaps of how you might apply all these criteria together and what the sort of flow might look like. You know, so you might have a lead arrive through a website lead form, for example, and you know things about that lead based on what they've put in the form, their contact details, the product they're interested in, a few other bits and pieces. You might have a lead allocation system then that first of all looks at the attributes of that lead. Maybe it's about a particular product type and says, okay, only a certain group of our sales reps actually have the skills to deal with an inquiry for that particular product type. So straight away, the system's gone from saying I've got a pool of all the sales reps in the business down to a more narrow set that could accept this lead. You could consider geography and other bits and pieces there as well. You might have a lead scoring system come into play here, but where this is worth dropping in the case of in the hands of a sales rep at this point, or whether it needs to go to some sort of other team. But then you've got your pool of essentially of sales reps that could service this lead based on skills, geography, and so on. The system will then say, okay, who's available right now? Who's working? Who's on the clock? Who's got the ability to actually talk to this customer in the next 30 minutes or hour or so? And it also may consider how many leads each of these salespeople have in their queues as well, how much workload they've got, how many they're going to have to get through before they get to the lead that's just arrived, and then decide based on that, this is an even narrower pool of people that could potentially take this leads. Right skills, right to service this customer, available now, workload is suitable. And then at that point there, you probably apply some sort of round robin system where it goes bam, 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 bam amongst the people that are left and drops it into the queue, the lead queue of the next person that would be available in that round robin system. The other factors there, afterwards you go through, you then monitor what's happened, you alerted leads that are not contacted, but we're going to return to those somewhat later in the webinar. So I'll perhaps leave that one there.
Okay. Hey, Brett, we might just throw to you for a minute from your perspective based off your own experience and maybe some examples around lead rotation and discussions of various tools built into the Salesforce platform that allow for lead rotation. Have you got some sort of comments or some experience that you could share here?
Yeah, absolutely. I've sort of experienced here both in how we manage these internally at Salesforce and how a number of my customers have done so as well. I think Matt's point about picking what makes the most sense for your business, whether it is geography, skills-based, product-based, availability-based, or round robin, or most likely some hybrid of 2 or 3 of those. I think that's super important to really experiment with what's going to work best for you. You know your business, you know it's going to make the most sense. So I would pick 2 of those 3 or 2 or 3 of those top different ways, for example, geography and skills-based, and start kind of going from there. Have a plan. I think that's one of the most important things that you can possibly do. And we'll come back to this in an example later as well. But one of the worst possible scenarios when you implement something like this is low adoption, because you're spending money on something that is supposed to make your business better. And if there's low adoption, the chances are that your individual reps probably think that this is making their job more challenging or more monotonous or whatever the case may be. If you have a plan to mitigate that risk and really have phases of how you're going to experiment with this, that is a great way to ensure that this is not going to be an issue. For example, if you were to start with a phase of let's just do round robin, everybody gets a fair shake at it, 10 people, a line, one at a time, that's a great way to start. From there, you'll start to see, okay, where are some sort of the gaps that we're missing here? And you can start to specialize it a bit more. Maybe it's state by state, each rep has their own state or postcodes within that state. And then from there, you have that round robin system within that geographical rules that you've set up. At the same time, product or skills based. If there's a particular type of customer or particular B2B versus B2C customer and particular reps to deal with that, that's sort of a phase 3 you can look at as well. So again, having a plan and making sure that your system is flexible enough to adjust when things don't go the way that you intended, whether that's good or bad. Sometimes they don't go the way you intended in a really positive way, or if it's a way where it just didn't quite work the way you wanted it to, just make sure that you're able to be flexible in your plan and make sure that plan is something that you believe you can actually realistically stick to internally to make sure the adoption and the investment is well spent.
Thanks, Brett. Some good insight there, and we covered a lot. So just perhaps a couple of key takeaways around sort of lead allocation, or clearly automate whenever possible. Although manual allocation can be suitable for some sort of smaller business, it's very difficult to scale and certainly prone to error. Probably the 2 most important things I think we touched on there is having a really fast response time, get in contact with an inquiry quickly, and have the right person where you can actually make that first call. It's going to get you off to the best possible chance of getting a result on a particular inquiry or lead. Start simple. I think we heard a fair bit about that. Just implement a round robin framework if that's all you can do from a lead allocation point of view. Even that can be extremely beneficial. The criteria you select to allocate leads will be bespoke to every organisation. There's no doubt about that. and we're not here to sort of tell you exactly what to use, but you should at least consider on what basis you will be allocating leads, and you should you should distribute leads on arrival or just in time. You know, with the gold standard, it being some combination of these two. Ensure you're also monitoring performance so you can iterate and improve over time. The effort certainly be worth the reward. So we're going to move on and just talk now a little bit about contact procedures. It can be somewhat of a dry topic, but it's fundamentally very, very important. We've talked about you know, a lead in the CRM and then getting it distributed to the right sales rep, but what do you actually do with them? How do you get that first contact? How do you get to first base and make initial contact with a particular lead? It's an area you need to be very prescriptive and not just sort of leave it up to the business. Don't let the reps decide how that's going to work. Define it, track it, and also enforce it through a contact procedure. Why do we think this is important? Look no further than these couple of charts we're just sort of bringing up on the screen now. These are generic graphs. They represent on average call attempts and contact rates. You need to get to leads fast is the key thing, and often, and you need to make contact in the first instance, let alone try and sell something. It's just getting to first base. If you set it up correctly, your CRM can greatly assist in this process, and we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. Perhaps, Matt, I might throw to you first. As part of a really robust contact procedure, what are some of the things that you should be considering in getting to first base, you know, making that first initial contact?
Thanks, Dan. And before I answer this question, I was going to make just one point, an important point I overlooked on the previous set of ones, just about lead allocation and how you achieve all those things we talked about. And the point there is simply that any good CRM will have tools to help you do that lead allocation rotation built into it, and there's lots of third-party solutions as well. So there's effort involved, but it's not like you're building it from scratch. I just wanted to make that point before we moved on, because it's quite important after talking about some quite complicated stuff. So in terms of contact procedures, you know, and in terms of things that should be considered in terms of kind of making first contact and getting to first base, the first thing of all is this is mainly about setting clear expectations and procedures and processes inside your business. CRM and systems and tools help you monitor and enforce and automate parts of contact procedures, but you've got to begin from setting the standards, exactly what is expected from your people when a lead arrives within the business. And clearly, we're talking primarily about digital leads here, because call-ins and walk-ins you're already talking to by their very nature. But the things you should be looking at: timeliness of first contact. I mean, maximum 2 business hours. Some businesses are achieving that now, plenty are not. But realistically, you know, if you're not getting to your leads within 2 hours, business hours, and ideally sooner, then you're doing it worse than your competitors are. There will be some competitors out there that are, that are actually meeting and exceeding those sort of benchmarks. You've got to make sure in that time is first contact, again, you're monitoring and enforcing that. It's no good setting the standard if you don't monitor and enforce it. Automatic lead allocation we talked about before also helps with that timeliness of first contact too. You're unlikely to achieve that without really effective automated lead allocation. So yeah, within 2 hours, ideally sooner, really needs to be the standard, and that's got to be set across the business as an expectation, and continue to make it better and better. It's not just 2 hours and forget, it's 2 hours until we're achieving that, and then it becomes shorter and shorter and shorter. Number of contact points, some of the other things you have to think about too, you know, again, quite bespoke to each business, but typical wisdom would say a minimum of 8 attempts to contact a lead over a period of time. You need to contact leads a lot. You know, some of the salespeople on the call will no doubt, that won't come as any surprise, but you really do. You know, if you're not, it's not necessarily 8+ within a day or 2 days. You know, some of those will be spaced out over time and through different mechanisms, but it's that sort of high volume of contacts. Again, it's about measuring and learning though what works for your business. Types of touch points, again, try phone, try email, try SMS, try WhatsApp, try Facebook Messenger. Again, try and find out how the client wants to be contacted and talk to them back that way as well. That'll increase your contact rates as well. Talked about frequency of touch points. So again, you know, longer gaps, time rolls on, you know, make sure you try and hit people hard up front to get through to them, but after that, back it off, but keep going. Don't just stop after the first couple of days. And then you adapt your contact procedures as well to the client. You know, if you've got lead scoring in place, topic for a future webinar, terrific. Then, you know, you could use that to determine whether this is a hot lead to deal with now, or whether it's one for later on. But at the very least, you can have humans kind of classify your leads. Partly goes back to sort of the lead versus opportunity conversation before, and then can modify your contact procedures to suit.
Matt, a fair bit to sort of consider there, and but perhaps some of that may sort of come across as quite complex. Have you got some advice here on how to implement a good contact procedure, and how can the CRM help that?
Sure. Yeah, good question, Dan. Look, and it's another one where the 80-20 rule applies. Certainly you can achieve a lot with some of the more simple steps when it comes to these contact procedures. And as I said at the start, it doesn't have to be complicated. The first step is just establishing expectations. It's got nothing to do with technology or CRM or anything at that point. It's just having a clear standard across the business and expectations of what a contact procedure looks like. But then, of course, there's many ways CRM can help, and particularly as contact processes get more complicated. You've got your basic processes, your offline, you've got your contact processes established and communicated to everyone. You then start using CRM, first of all, for record keeping around that, most importantly for reporting and alerting, so that, again, you're aware straight away when a lead has not been contacted within the first 2 hours, or no contact attempt's been made, or a later follow-up has not occurred, or so on. And that can be done both reactively as sort of reporting, looking at where did we fall down, or what was the average compliance rate with our contact procedure, or it can be done proactively as an alert to say this lead has not been followed up the way it should have been. Let's do something about that. From that point on to there, you automate. Basically, CRM can automate quite a lot of contact procedure steps. And that's an important stage to really getting advanced with contact procedures. That's less about the very first contact, and it's more about the longer term follow-up and contact. But again, that's the 80-20 rule there. That's sort of the 20. You can achieve a lot with automation of contact procedures in CRM, but it's not the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, good. Hey, thanks, Matt. Hey, Brett, I just want to come across to you, because offline you mentioned to me the other day that Salesforce have had some experience with a major home builder in Queensland. And just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So that builder is iBuildNew, which I'm sure many on the call will be familiar with. And I think that when we go back to having a plan, I think that's a really important piece to speak about with iBuildNew. When they first wanted to implement a CRM, they really put together a really solid plan of how to make sure that this became their single point of entry for data. They wanted to make sure that every single piece of information was going into their CRM so they could leverage that data as they continue to get solid adoption. That plan was 3 very easy phases. Number 1 was adoption, making sure that between Salesforce and their implementation team and the team actually using the system, we're all aligned on the training and the mechanisms that were available to them to make sure that they were fully enabled on the platform. As that happened, that went from sort of being a new tool people had to use to something that the reps knew was their single source of truth and something that was genuinely helping them throughout their day. That second phase was automation. Once everybody was comfortable and really excited about Salesforce as their platform, they did start to implement some of these automation procedures for leads, the geographical, the skills base, the product base, and of course, anything the like that was really helpful for them. Because they did all of that and they were able to capture all their data in one place, they were able to really take this to the next level and start to nurture these leads as well. We all know we get a lot of leads that end up not going anywhere, at least today or tomorrow or even in the next 6 months or so. When you're able to identify that and have great data around it, you're able to automatically nurture prospects. So these prospects could be put on an automatic journey, and they were drip fed content throughout the time that they were not quite ready to start really talking about purchasing, but we're really in that consideration mode, which can take a long time. And from there, when all of your competitors, if you're nurturing your prospects, in this case, iBuildNew nurturing theirs, when their competitors were going after these same prospects manually, they were not able to compete, because by the time that these prospects were ready to buy, the first name that was in their head was iBuildNew as a result of that nurturing. And they saw their conversion rates skyrocket as a result, and as well as their deal cycle time decrease considerably. So they're getting deals done a lot quicker.
Very interesting case study, Brett. Thanks for sharing some of that with us. It's plenty to take away from that. I'm just gonna shift the conversation along a little bit, guys. I think keen to just talk a little bit about tracking performance. Before I do that, obviously some of the things we talked about there was making sure you have a very robust follow-up procedure for every single lead that comes into the business, whether it's a walk-in or whether it's a digital inquiry. Making sure you've got that contact procedure set for the business, and it's very executed very well. And wherever you can, use automation and reminders to make life as easy as possible. So let's now talk a little bit about tracking performance. There's that sort of old saying, what gets measured gets done. It's one that I think in this case holds so true. But let's now talk about what should be measured and tracked when it comes to lead management. When it comes to making sales, we all know that people can actually make it happen. They are the key ingredient here. And as much as anything, it's going to come back to people. But how do we know if they are performing? How do we know if they are giving every lead the best possible chance? How do you know if those responsible for making that initial contact, trying to get you to first base with leads, are doing what is asked of them under that contact procedure? Matt, I wanted to sort of throw to you, what sort of metrics would you recommend are tracked and measured with respect to lead management?
Thanks, Dan. Look, we've touched on this briefly, most of these briefly in previous sections, probably just a matter of kind of wrapping them all up. And there's many things you can track and measure, but these are probably some of the most important ones. And you'll find that any additional that are on top of this will likely come out quite naturally for your business as you start implementing some of the things we just talked about. Because people will be asking questions like, I'd like to know, or what is the answer to? But the key ones across the board are some of the things we've talked about. Number one is having some measurement in place and reporting in place that all leads are being entered into CRM and it's happening in a timely manner, going right back to the start of this conversation. Now, those are not straightforward to measure, but it can be done by looking at leads that enter the CRM at later stages. Once you've defined sales funnels and so on, and you've got multiple stages of tracking of leads and opportunities through our CRM, if you see leads turning up in your CRM that don't go through all of those phases and just drop straight in, maybe as an opportunity rather than a lead, or whatever it might be, that gives you your exception reporting to sort of say, okay, this lead did not get entered in a timely manner, did not get entered at the start. Really important to have some metrics in place around the timeliness of those initial contact attempts, lead response times. I kept talking about how 2 hours or less is the metric nowadays, has been for quite some time. Again, CRM will really help you with that as long as you are getting reps to capture contact attempts or status changes. Contact rates, so that's aggregating, what percentage of your leads you get to, and that's really important so that as you evolve some of these lead allocation systems, these contact procedures, everything we've talked about, you can make changes to them and see what difference it makes in terms of actually getting through to your leads. Following those contact procedures, again, that can be often more exception-based than anything else, but it's about having your CRM throw off alerts when a contact was expected and it didn't happen. And then importantly, a lot of these metrics and every other can be segmented by person, as in the actual salesperson inside your business, by the product you're dealing with, the geography of the customer and so on, which you get some really interesting insights out of, and use those to continue evolving all the things we've talked about today, particularly lead allocation, contact procedures, and the timeliness of the quality of data entry into CRM to continue to make things better and improve conversion rates, drive conversion, time to conversion down, all these things that you actually want as outputs. It's all this data and these metrics drive a continuous improvement cycle, which is really the goal you should be getting to here once you've implemented the basics.
Hey, Brett, what about yourself? Anything you want to sort of add here when it comes to, tracking performance?
To be honest, I just have kind of a pointed answer for this. This is the whole point of having a CRM. If you don't do what we're talking about here in terms of actually capturing your data and then actually tracking it and using those really awesome.
Oh, I think we might have lost.
There's really no point in having one. This is ROI. This is where you get the value out of the platform. So the more that you can track, the more that you can show, the better things will go.
Thanks, Brett. We lost you there for a minute, but I think we got the main gist of it. In terms of, that's a key element of any CRM, and really one of the key successes you'll get out of the CRM is being able to track performance in a really granular way. Hey, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so we're gonna shoot across and grab a couple of questions. If anyone has any questions, please pop them into the Q&A box. There's one there that I want to come to in a minute. But just to summarise some of the points we've just talked about in terms of tracking and measuring performance, I think certainly Matt spoke quite a lot about just keeping the metrics really simple. We can get overly complicated here, but keeping them very simple include things like the timeliness of lead entry, initial contact attempts, lead response times, contact rates, all those sort of things can be done very, very easily. Many of these can be segmented by person. They can be segmented by buyer type or product. They can be segmented by geography. So there's plenty of options there to slice and dice when it comes to measuring those sort of basic metrics. This data can then be used to establish benchmarks, to manage staff performance, to manage reward schemes and incentives, all that sort of good stuff. So getting some sort of basic measurement and tracking around contact rates and the initial contact is very important. So we are going to kind of wrap things up and just move to a couple of questions. Given we've only got 2 minutes left, there was a couple of really key takeaways, I think, from the overall webinar. Hopefully everyone's gleaned from it. Firstly, rubbish in, rubbish out. I think that goes without saying. Keep the data really clean. If you're going to get any value out of your CRM and lead management generally, you need to keep the data really, really clean, and just be clear on what's the minimum information you're going to capture on a lead, and then build on that data through the process. Make sure you've got a contact procedure and it's very clear. It's absolutely essential you have that. It's very definitive and very clear and well sort of cascaded through the organisation. Then track and report against that. And obviously you would have heard throughout the webinar quite a lot about automate wherever you can, whether it's about capturing the lead, ingesting it into your CRM, or follow-up reminders and these type of things, but a hell of a lot of opportunity to automate when it comes to the CRM and lead management generally. Okay, so questions. I'm just going to. There is one here, and I might even throw to you, Brett, on this one. We've got a question, which is in a large organisation with many reps. What happens when you have reps who are on leave? Are there any sort of automation rules you can use to switch leads or opportunities across to reps that to make the administration easier? Any experience you could share on that front?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of our customers do this, and we do this internally as well. Obviously, the larger the organization, the more likely you are to have more people on leave at any given time. All of the tools within Salesforce that you can use for lead automation and allocation, as well as the Salesforce native feature to actually set when you are on leave and not in the office or virtually in the office. That is something that those automation and allocation tools pick up as well. And so you basically have a backup, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, however many, and the round robin or whatever allocation automation tool you set up will quickly go down that list until they find someone who is available.
I might quickly add there as well, though, that's very relevant and probably more relevant in larger organizations, but equally applies to smaller ones too, and it works very well too. Every automatic lead allocation system I've worked with over the years, which has been many years, have all handled this really effectively, and it's really important, whether you're a 3 salesperson org or a 1,000 salesperson org. And it can also be backed up by automatic re-rotation, which we touched on briefly before, which is where maybe a lead has been dropped into the lap of someone who's about to go on leave and they don't get to it in time. Good lead allocation will pick it up and will give it to someone else after it's not actioned after a certain period of time.
Yep. Agreed. Hey guys, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for your comments. We haven't got any further questions in the chat box, and we actually have run out of time. So I did want to say, a special thanks to everyone that's joined today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and found it a valuable conversation. Our account managers, the iBuildNew account managers, that is, will be sharing some of this content with you. So feel free to reach out to them if you haven't seen something over the next couple of days, or indeed reach out to myself or Matt if you'd like to have some discussion related to the topic we've just covered over the last hour. Hope you all found it valuable. Just as a quick reminder, we do have a couple of other webinars coming up over the next couple of months, one related more to lead scoring and then also one to lead nurturing. So hopefully you get a chance to join us at those webinars. Until then, again, thanks for your time, and hope you enjoyed it. Farewell.